Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a friend of the show, Becky Reel. Becky is the former owner of For Papa's Sake Home Care and is now here to discuss her new company, Reel Home Care Consulting. Welcome, Becky.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So you were previously with us as a guest last year, and that was to discuss For Papa's Sake, the home care company that you and your family started in honor and memory of your grandfather. What brought you to starting Reel Home Care Consulting?
Yeah, so I ran For Papa's Sake a little close to 10 years. I was there for about 10 years. And as we grew bigger and bigger and we had to refer people out, I got really concerned about the referral sources out there. I got really concerned about feedback I was hearing about other agencies all over the country. And I started consulting for people to help find the right agency because they were having trouble. Their agencies were calling them back, or the stories I was hearing were horrible. And I thought, this cannot be the state of our home care industry as a whole in the United States. And I have this desire to change the way we do home care, to change the perception of home care, change the perception of caregivers. So this was an opportunity for me to make a bigger impact across the country on our elderly, on caregivers, to help coach them on how to be more empathetic, how to really run a business that's people first.
Absolutely, absolutely. What was one of the biggest challenges when you were still running For Papa's Sake that you really found to resonate the most with you and probably other home care companies experience as well?
So people always talk about the staffing shortage, right? It's been going on before COVID. I think COVID amplified it quite a bit, but the staffing shortage has been a thing since I joined the home care agency over 10 years ago. It's just the state of this industry. So it was always a challenge, but we really focus on that people over profit approach. So we never really were in that COVID didn't change things for us that much. It was always a challenge, but it's always because we were being so picky, so selective with who we were bringing on board, because our philosophy was, if my grandfather was still alive, would I be comfortable sending this person to care for my own loved one, right? And if we were wishy-washy about that, then we didn't move forward with that person. So finding high quality people, I think, was always the challenge. Staffing industry as a whole, there were people, they want to work. We were getting hundreds of applications a week, but finding those really good people, I think, was always the challenge.
Yeah, I agree. We say, we kind of laugh and jest when, they talk about the labor shortage, because it's not just home care. Mm-hmm. It's banks, hospitals, you name it, restaurants. And it's like they forget before COVID, there were a lot of issues with staffing. And like yourselves, For Papa's Sake, we're very selective on who we hire, and it's more about the quality than the quantity. It's more about the person than the position. And I think a lot of that gets lost when, families are searching for home care or looking for long-term care solutions for their loved ones, because, I don't know about your experience, but people don't know what they don't know. And they think, just because you're getting a home care company or you're picking a restaurant to eat at, you're going by the name more than you are the person actually providing the service. So we put a big emphasis on the importance of the staff. You are the face of the company, you're the face of the brand, and you're having 95% of all the interaction with these families and their loved ones that we're going to be servicing. So that's where that quality really matters most, I think.
And when a client would call and they'd say, I want service, it's a brand new client, I want service today or tomorrow. Your job as an agency is to help educate that person about the state of where you're at. So could you have a body there? Sure. Is that person going to be the best person to care for your mom, your dad, or your loved one? Maybe not. So most people understand that you need some time to make sure that you're getting a good fit in there as opposed to just throwing a body into a home. But it's the agency's job to educate on that. And to, again, if they've never gone through it, that's a good thing, I would always say. But then you have to walk them through what this looks like and explain that there aren't just caregivers sitting in a room waiting to be called to go to work. They have lives, they have families.
I like to say it's not takeout. It's
right.
I use the analogy, if you want or need to have, surgery that's elective, not life-threatening, of course, you can't call a surgeon and he's just going to operate with you, on you later that day or the next day. There is a process, and it's not to be difficult or to cause more obstacles for the families, but they have to realize, the process is important because, let's say the person has a cat or a dog and your staff are allergic to a cat or a dog, or they have a latex allergy. I mean, there's so many reasons why the process is important and has to take place, where it does make it impossible to just send somebody an hour later to a home for, service. Now, for Papa's sake, you had, a story, and, if you'd like to share some of that, but I want to ask you why you feel it is important for an agency to have a story.
Yes. So my story in a nutshell was my grandfather, who I adoringly called Papa. Both my kids are named after him. His name was Harry, and he was such a big part of my life. I grew up with a single mom, and my grandpa was my father figure for a very long time. And when he passed away due to a tragic end of life at a nursing home, something that could have been prevented. But we didn't want to just end his story there. We knew there was more to his story. He was a very vibrant comedian, and his job and his life was to make people laugh and to bring joy to people. And we just knew that wasn't his ending. So we wanted to do something to keep his memory alive, but also provide better options for our community, because at that time there weren't a lot of great options. And my favorite story is my parents started it. And when my mom and dad went to go file for their license, my dad came back and said, do you know how many agencies there are in our area? We're in the Chicagoland area. Do you know how many? Meaning, like, maybe we shouldn't do this. There's so many agencies. And my mom said, it doesn't matter. We can do it better. It doesn't matter how many competitors there are. We are different. And we are different because we were operating because we wanted to do something for the community. Our goal was never to be the biggest agency. We didn't want to have 10, 20 offices. We wanted to be quality, and we wanted to be the best agency, not the biggest agency. So that's our story. And when I talk to agencies now and I say, what's your story? And they say things like, well, we're family owned. That's not your story. There's lots of family owned agencies. Why are you in this industry? I assume you didn't wake up one day and think, I'm going to buy a home care agency, because that's not what most people do. There's usually a reason, right? It's either that you have a loved one that went through something similar, or you came from another country and you saw the gap in care here in America. There's a story, and we need to figure out that story, because that story is what's going to connect your consumers and your caregivers to your agency. Yes, they're looking at reviews. They're looking at the name, if you're a franchise or private. They're looking at all of these different pieces, but that story is what they're going to remember about you.
Absolutely. What if an agency doesn't have a story? How do you go about helping them to create a story?
Everybody has a story. You just have to dig. You have to figure out the why. There's always a why, and I think we talked a lot about this last time we met last year. In everything we do, there's a why, and it's important to share that why, because that why, again, is what connects you back to people. So that why did you decide to open up that agency? Maybe it is because you were looking for a new business venture, but there's some heart, and that somehow that heart's going to connect that story. So there's always a story.
Absolutely.
There's always a mission.
Becky, can you share a heartwarming story that you've helped crafted, or that how your services have helped to make a significant difference?
So yeah, there's this one client I have in particular. The owner's from India. And it was a similar thing. What was your story? And it's a franchise. And he said, I just wanted to open up a franchise, in this area. I grew up with my grandparents, and we cared for them. And that's what I know to do. That's great. But what the story really was, what we came out with, it's true, is that in other countries, and I do firmly believe we're the only country that doesn't really care for our elders. We're the ones that really throw people in nursing homes, and we expect other people to care for them, but that's not the norm in most countries. When he came to America, he was appalled to see that. He thought, what are all these nursing homes? Why is there one in every corner, right? And he thought, no, we need to teach this country, at least teach this community, that people didn't work their entire lives. They didn't care for us their entire lives just to be thrown into a nursing home and for that to be the end of their story. So he wanted to change that mission of his and bring that culture back here quite a bit.
And you were sharing with me too about a caregiver, I believe her name was Katie, and how she became inspired. Share that with our viewers and listeners.
Yeah. So Katie was a caregiver of ours. She was a former PR executive and just was still doing it, but was looking for something to fulfill a little bit of her time. So she started caregiving with us 1 or 2 days a week, just here and there, just to make a difference, to feel good. And she started doing it more and more, and it ended up taking up most of her time. And she loved it so much. And keep in mind, Katie was pretty high up there in her executive career, right? She wasn't just starting out, she was established. She decided, I love this so much that I want to go be a registered nurse. And she went back to school full time to be a nurse, to care for the elderly, and actually end up working at one of the facilities that we worked really closely with. And to this day, I always say caregiving isn't always a long-term thing. Sometimes it's a stepping stone to get to the next step. And your job as an agency is to help give those caregivers those tools, the experience, the support to get to whatever that next step is. And that was a full circle story for me that I still keep in touch with her. I adore her. I'm so proud of her. But at that age, to be that established in your career and your life, and to say, you know what, this is what I want to do, and to go back to school to do that. And watching her go through that has been just probably one of the most fulfilling experiences that I didn't expect.
That's wonderful. And, I think it's important to, I think in healthcare in general, but specifically speaking from the home care perspective, you mentioned something earlier, and it's true. There's a lot of independent or, individuals that own home care companies, whether it be franchises or like for Papa's sake or for ourselves, we're independently owned and operated. I really feel like one of the key ingredients to success is having that personal connection in some way, whether it be through a spouse, a parent, a sibling, a child that you help to take care of, or even a close neighbor, because home care, and I say this to people all the time, it's unlike any other aspect of the senior care or long-term care industry in the fact that you're spending significant amounts of time with just that one individual versus being like in a facility where you're going room to room and, helping to take care of individuals. You're there for that one person. And I think that's where just having that personal connection is so crucial and can really help to, propel you to having the, success that for Papa's sake, for Papa's sake had. But just going into it as a business venture, I do see a lot of differences in companies that go into it for just a bottom line, the financial aspect of it versus I want to make a good living. I want to support my family, pay my bills, but I also want to be able to make a significant difference in somebody's life. And I think that's one of the key ingredients that can separate a successful company from one that may not be as successful.
Yeah, and those agencies are more challenging for me to work with, the ones that expect me to come in and just fix everything for them, develop a process, because I know the second I'm done, I know that it's going to lose all meaning and they're probably not going to use a lot of the process, right? I love working with the agencies that have a story or fine, you didn't have a loved one that went through this, but you really care about this population. You really want to do a good job. Those are the ones I excel with.
Right. Absolutely. I want to talk, because you'd shared with me, one of your, I don't know if it would be ingredients or philosophies rather, is, that emotional intelligence, that EQ for companies, caregivers, agencies. What measures should an agency take to ensure that their client feels comfortable, respected, and importantly, emotionally supported in their home?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about emotional intelligence. I talk a lot about empathetic marketing, empathetic operations. When I came into the home care world, I had zero home care experience. My background was running sales teams and marketing for Fortune 500 companies. I knew nothing about home care. So there was a little bit of a grace period where I had to actually learn the agency and caregivers and that whole thing, right? But it was a very easy transition because bottom line with any sales organization, any organization is caring about people and taking care of people. And if you take and it's basic, right? But I don't think people focus on that enough. If you take care of your people, they are going to want to do a good job for you. They're going to want to make you proud. And that goes from your office staff, that goes from your caregivers, and it goes to your clients. Right. So how do you ensure people are being taken care of? You have to care, right? Or hire people that care. And it's more than just doing the bare minimum. So I was at a conference earlier this week, and they talked about doing the unexpected, right? So doing things not because your clients or your caregivers expect you to do that, but because you want to do that, because you want to do a little bit extra. And we did this all the time. And was it always financially the best decision? No, but it paid off in the long run. So examples of that. You have a client that perhaps didn't have a great experience with a fill-in caregiver, a substitute caregiver, or just generally something happened, right? And it was not a great experience. Before they even come to you and say, like, I would like a credit on my invoice or whatever the case may be, going above and anticipating their needs and saying, we are so sorry, that is not the experience we wanted you to have. As a token of our apologies, you're going to see X amount on your next invoice. Truly, we are so sorry. Those little things, right? They didn't have to ask for, they weren't even expecting that. But showing that you cared enough that that's not the experience you wanted them to have shows them that you care beyond what they're paying you. Same with caregivers. If, especially right now with everything going on in the world, right? What are we doing to support our caregivers? Perhaps what's happening is not impacting them directly, but it's still a heavy world we live in. So how are we going beyond that touch point of scheduling for the caregivers? That's typically why people reach out to their caregivers to cover a shift or to, something shift related. But these are human beings and they're doing a very hard job. So what are you doing to connect with them? So maybe put together care packages. We did this during COVID, self-care packages for our team. Or, somebody lost a client and, the client passed away and it was a very, very, they were emotionally connected. And that was they're struggling, right? Because that impacts the caregiver too. Do something nice for the caregiver, do something for their mental health, maybe a massage gift card, or even just a handwritten card if you can't afford it, just something that they're not expecting that will connect you as human beings beyond employers or beyond client relationships.
Absolutely. Let's talk about when an agency is focusing on that emotional support and the companionship. Now, does that extend beyond the ADLs, activities of daily living?
Absolutely. The ADLs are the basic. The very, very basic core function of what you should be doing as a caregiver at an agency are those ADLs. But what can you do beyond those that's going to enhance that quality of life? So, if you know that a client's birthday is coming up, or maybe it's the anniversary of their spouse that passed away, what little things can you do to make their day better, or to say, I'm human, you are human, I'm here for you? That's beyond an ADL. There's nothing on that checklist when you're checking in or checking out of the day saying that you did that, or that you brought your client some flowers, or maybe, but those little details. And I really encourage agencies to capture as much information as possible to put into the care plans, so that we'll be able to connect the caregiver with the client. Birthdays, anniversaries, dogs' names, pets' names, whatever is beyond those ADLs are really important, again, from that connective standpoint.
Right. Absolutely. I want to talk about when it comes to, finding staff. What steps would you recommend or do you suggest to agencies to help them find those caregivers that can help provide, that emotional support, but also the physical support for the ADLs with clients based on the personality of that client and what their needs are?
Obviously, having a really great relationship with your caregivers is obvious and key. And I don't think a lot of agencies put a lot of effort into that. Again, I think a lot of agencies, and I'm speaking very generally, but a lot of agencies treat their caregivers like commodities. Go here, do this, right? But again, it's always about connecting. What can you do to have a deeper connection with your caregivers? So obviously when you're hiring, you're doing the basics. You're on Indeed, you're sourcing from various sources. But I have found that deeper connection with the caregivers, and the more that they become advocates for you and ambassadors for you, they're going to start referring their friends. And you have having a strong referral program for your caregivers helps from a monetary standpoint, but also they're going to want other people that are like them. So the caregivers that are the good ones that you can send this caregiver anywhere and they're going to knock it out the park. They likely have friends that are like that too, because people tend to hang out with similar people, right? So have a strong referral program. So caregivers that refer other caregivers. And then when you get those referrals, really work those referrals and do what you can to get them on board, treat them like people. But I think that really, it helps a lot. And then it's less churn and burn. Those people typically stay a lot longer too.
Right. Absolutely. I just had written an article for my column on McKnight's this week, and it's all about making home care an appealing and viable choice for candidates, because oftentimes they're looking at, okay, do I want to have that meaningful relationship with my client, or am I going to have to sacrifice for the higher pay to be in a facility and take care of multiple people and maybe sacrifice that personal relationship? And I know the reality of the world is we have to make money to pay bills. And the other reality is Medicare and health insurance does not pay for home care. So there is a certain level that you can really, have to find that sweet spot in order to be able to provide the care where it's affordable for the families and their loved ones, but also provide a living for the staff, right? Mm-hmm. And not everybody is fortunate enough to have long-term care insurance or, aid and attendance through the VA, or, even auto insurance, where in Michigan, that's, kind of been a sore subject because there's been laws changed for the reimbursement rate on auto insurance cases. But how do you find that balance for finding that high quality candidate, but also being able to afford to find that high quality candidate?
Yeah, it's an ongoing struggle, but I think agencies so focus on that monetary piece, and they think caregivers are truly going to go, if it's $17 versus $19, they're going to always go to the $19 agency. And that's not always the case. I don't think that's the case. Right. So for us, we had some benefits. We had a 401k and we matched it. And that was kind of unheard of in our area, but teaching people the idea of saving. And again, it was beyond saving. We were trying to help them understand that we're trying to help you prepare for your future. We know you might not be here long term, but while you're here, we want to help you get a little bit of a safety net for you. Time off, vacation time, bereavement time. So if somebody needs that time beyond giving them that time off, supporting them. Again, it's about that connection. Making sure that they know that schedule is, we're going to work with you on your schedule. If you are a CNA, you're working for your CNA program, like we want to work with you. But it's so beyond, in all of our surveys and feedback we got, very rarely was it that we were the high. We did pay well. We did. Were we the highest? I don't always think so, but we did pay very well because we wanted people to not worry so much about money. But that wasn't why people stayed with us. They stayed with us because we really cared and we took care of them. We went above and beyond. And that's the key for retention. We had some of the lowest turnovers in this area. And people typically only left us because life changes, career changes. They rarely left us because they were unhappy. And so I'm going to advise people to stop focusing so much on the money. Yes, you want to pay well. You might have to charge your clients a little bit more to be able to afford that. But then the talk track there is you get what you pay for. It's about quality over quantity. And yes, I could charge you less, but we have to factor in how much we have to pay our team, the liability insurance, the workers' comp, all that stuff gets baked into it. And again, it's your job as the agency to educate the community on where that money is going. If you're charging $40, right, and they know that the caregivers are making 20, your job is to educate them to say, we're not pocketing that extra 20. Where is that going? And also, we invest a lot of that money back into our caregivers. So another benefit that we did was continuous training beyond the state mandate. So we did CPR training. Caregivers would come to us and say, I would like to be trained in X, Y, and Z. We figured out a way to make it happen because that's going to help them in the long run. And it shows that we're listening to what they're looking for.
Absolutely. And, likewise, when you have a family that comes to you and they're concerned about maybe a bad experience they had before they found your agency, how do you discuss that dignity, independence, the reliability of the staff, and how do you go about when you were still operating for Papa's sake, or when you're advising your home care clients that are trying to implement these new strategies and kind of philosophies? How do you educate them on how you're going to go above and beyond for their loved one?
So a lot of it is because I feel like when clients have had a bad experience, they're very jaded, rightfully so. I would be too. And especially just what people hear about agencies, you typically only hear about the bad things, right? So a lot of it is seeing to believe it. And I usually would tell people, give us some time to show you. I don't want to sit here and give you all of these words that probably mean nothing to you right now, but let me show you. And you have a very close touch points throughout that first week. There's strong touch points. You check in after that first shift. You check in after that first full week. You check in at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You are involved every step of the way. So if there are red flags and similar things that are happening, right, you can address it immediately as opposed to waiting for something to blow up. But you really factor in, what was that experience? Was it that caregiver was on their phone the whole time and neglecting the client with the other agency? And so when you're bringing in somebody from your agency, you're very transparent. You're very transparent with that caregiver. Listen, here's what happened with this other agency. We are not going to allow that to happen again. And you give them as much background as you can, again, to connect. You give them all the background information you can to say, this is what happened. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. So that way the caregiver, it's very top of mind for them that we're not going to go down the same road.
Right. Absolutely. Kind of going back to, a piggyback to that last question, is a lot of that is about communication, which is so crucial and key both ways for staff and for the families. What does your communication plan look like with your clients and caregivers?
When I was at the agency?
Either or. What do you recommend to home care companies? How did you handle communication?
So we were very communication heavy, almost, we would tell people right up from the front, we are over communicators, and that doesn't always work for people. But I put myself in the client's shoes a lot of times. And if this was my loved one, I want as much information as possible. And you have every right to say, like, this is too much information. Let's back off a little bit. But we always start with over communicating. And so that onboarding, that first really 2-3 weeks is the most critical part when onboarding. But I always recommend, and this is what I train my clients on, my home care agencies on, is, again, if somebody's never been through this, they don't know what to expect. So it's your job as an agency to hold their hand throughout this process. They might be dealing with a loved one who's dying, or, in a critical state. They're not thinking straight. So you need to hold their hand through this process. So once they say, yes, I want to move forward with you, making sure they know what is next. So next steps are, once they sign the agreement, we are going to start looking for your scheduling team. We will be in touch with you on this date, no later than this date, with an update. So that way they know when to expect an update from you. Otherwise, you'll probably be getting emails and calls from them the next few days. Do you have an update? Do you have an update? Set those expectations right from the start. So then once you have everything solidified, get back on a Zoom call, a call with the family, and walk through the care plan together. Make sure that everyone is on the same page, because there's things that maybe didn't come up during that initial assessment with the client that now we're thinking through, or they forgot to mention something. So you walk through that care plan. Again, you're holding everybody's hand. You're walking them through that schedule of how many caregivers you have in the schedule and what the schedule is going to look like. And then you talk about what that first day is going to look like. and you explain who from your agency is going to be there to represent you on that first day, and explain how that's going to work. And you're setting expectations every step of the way. And then once you actually start services, you are checking in, you are making phone calls. And I know talking on the phone makes everybody all uncomfortable these days because of technology, but pick up the phone. People want to talk to you when you're when you're in home care and you're dealing with someone's loved one. Pick up the phone, call them. How did that first shift go? Any feedback, anything we can do to help improve this for you? Then follow up with an email to all of the family members so they all feel connected and they know that you're watching over their loved one. And you do that for the first 2 weeks to make sure everything is smooth sailing. And once you know it's a good fit, then you can back off a little bit and you can have your quarterly meetings with your family. But I would say that was a long way of saying set expectations with the client, the family, and the caregiver, and follow through with that. You can't just send somebody out for a shift and that's the end of it, because that's not the end of it.
Absolutely. I know communication, we're right there with you. Over the years, we've had people test us when we say our phones are answered 24/7, and it's not through a call center or a call service. It's actually somebody working within the company. Yep. And this one lady actually tested that once. I think it was like 11:30 or midnight. And I was not the one with the phone, but she called and the office picked up and she quickly hung up. Well, they called right back and she was embarrassed. And she said, I really didn't think you would answer. And we said, well, there's a reason, we tell you the phones are answered 24/7 by someone within the company at all times, holidays, weekends, you name it. But that gave her a sense of confidence that, she wasn't just being told something that wasn't true. And I think, at least here in Michigan, because you guys are in Illinois, it's a little bit different for home care. We're a non-licensed state. So that just means anybody and everybody can say they are a home care company. And there's really no checks and balances in place to protect these families from that. And it's very unfortunate. And we're very hopeful that that will eventually change. And I will say Michigan's not the only state, but we shouldn't have any states that are non-licensed.
Agree.
So, Becky, we're going to have all the links and everything to Real Home Care Consulting in the show notes, as well as up on the screen. But I want to end with just a couple more questions, and I want to thank you for your time. I want to hear what you think is one thing you'd like people to know about the background of a busy home care company.
Oh, there's so much. That's a loaded question. I think there's 1,000 things going on at any moment in a home care agency. Call-offs, no call, no shows, caregiver, just dynamics, family dynamics with the clients. There's a lot going on. But I think it's important to speak your mind and have a voice and be an advocate for your loved one, regardless of all that noise in the agency, because that agency deals with this day in and day out. That's what they do. But the priority should always be the client's care. So if you're concerned about and this goes for caregivers too, a lot of times caregivers wouldn't voice their concerns because they were afraid. They were afraid they lose their job or get somebody in trouble. But if you don't speak what's on your mind, and if you don't advocate for somebody you care about, the agency's also not a mind reader. They're not going to know what's going on. So I would say, be true, be honest, and don't be afraid to share feedback, because people can't make things better if they don't know something's wrong or broken.
That's great advice. That's great advice. And, my final question, and this is one of my favorite questions I ask pretty much everybody, and that is, if we were to talk again in 5 years, where is Becky Reel in Real Home Care Consulting?
So Becky Reel Consulting is running strong, helping agencies across the country, transforming agencies across the country to level up, to change the way we do business, to make this a people first, people over profit kind of industry. Franchises, I speak to a lot of franchises, and it's disappointing how much support they get. They get some support, and all franchises are different, but I'd like to work with the franchises to get them stronger support so the franchise owners have more direction, have have more day-to-day support because they help them get started. But then it's really, then they are basically independent at that point for a lot of these franchises. So I hope to have helped hundreds of agencies in 5 years and really made a difference and ultimately changed the way our elders and people with disabilities are taken care of and change that perception.
And I'm sure you will do it. I have no doubt. And Becky Reel of Reel Home Care Consulting, thank you so much for joining us again. And we look forward to seeing the growth and all the positive impact you're going to be doing for home care companies.
Thank you so much.
It was our pleasure. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Becky Reel for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.